go ahead and we'll leave containers behind. Look to the future of the software-defined data center. If we have this discussion, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what is it going to look like? Where is this going? Is it going to go there quickly, or is it going to go there slowly? Greg, what's your sense? 5 years in the future of this, where is this going?
Okay, so if we look at this in two ways, one is from the industry perspective. In other words, the vendors, the pundits, etc. They're going to be talking about something, and they might even be talking amongst themselves. Hey, whatever happened to containers, software-defined, whatever the current buzz activity is, because they will be on to something new. The industry becomes bored very, very quickly. Once everybody starts adopting a common narrative, a common language, they're going to move on to something new. Containers, we're seeing that example already. Virtualized, it's become a commodity term, so we need to move on to something else. So they'll be on, the industry will be on to what is next on the timeline, the wave. On the other hand, the IT customers, okay, they're going to be going like, hey, whatever happened to all that software-defined buzz, the software-defined marketing, all these other things, while they're in the process of actually talking and rolling out and deploying and using what the industry is telling them they should be doing right now. So you're going to see the industry moving on to whatever is going to be next. You'll see the customers starting to deploy what we as an industry are telling them to do right now. They're going to actually be deploying. So that you got those different timelines.
Yoram, you agree? What you said is the future of software defined?
Yeah. Again, nobody knows what the future is, but I definitely agree. I think that nobody knows what forms this will take, but I have no doubt that software is gaining much more power and becoming much more dominant. And I mean, it's the way things usually are. It's always going from bottom up, which is the lower stuff always get commoditized. So it was chips in the beginning, then systems. So it's very clear that the way is that software always take over. And now I think, and going forward 3 years or 5 years or how far you want to go forward, I think the data center would be very different and would be much more software defined. Whatever form software defined will take, and we all pointed to all the challenges, all the mismatches between the different parts. But at the end of the day, I think over time things will become much more integrated. I think the issue that was mentioned earlier about vendor locking, which is a big issue in hardware right now, and it is a big issue with software right now, software defined, because the software vendor is becoming the new vendor that you are locked into. There, in my opinion, there will be ways to make components that can interoperate and therefore let the customer choose the best pieces to put together. Maybe it's going to be a long time, but the hardware guys have shown us that you can define very well defined interfaces and create components independently by different companies. We are definitely not there on the software side, but if software defined will be critical, I think it will be critical to build those interfaces to enable different companies, different entities to build different parts that they can integrate and interoperate. So the vendor lock-in issue, which we all know is going to be a roadblock, is going to be solved in one way or another.
The open API, among other things.
See, open source definitely could be one of the tools, but not necessarily just open source. It's all about defining we are not at that point yet, but if we would get to the point that we can define interfaces and draw the borders, which are very, very, nobody knows where the borders are exactly, but if there is a way to do it, then I think we can get to at least getting the point of vendor locking not to be a major issue.
Dana, the future of software defined, what are we going to be talking about 3 years from now, and what are you telling companies that they need to do in terms of looking at the future?
Sure. Well, we have to look at what their major requirements are. Companies want to have agile business processes, and they don't want to be waiting around for IT when they say we need to change, and they don't want to be held ransom by the costs and taxes that are employed by various vendors. So that's not going to change. They're going to continue to want to have what I call fungibility, which is to move from one type of host environment to another. They're going to want to have preset integrations and automation so that they're not playing systems integrator every time they want to update or change their infrastructure or software. And they're going to want portability, but not portability at the app level, portability at the entire workload. And they want that to be consistent across development, test, and then operations in a variety of different hosting environments, which gives them a marketplace to play in and gives them pricing power as a consumer rather than as someone that's held hostage by a vendor or a platform. So in order to do that, software-defined, containers, open source, cloud, these are all contributing factors to giving them that portability. So you can think of this as rather a very much like a power struggle between a oligarchy and a democracy. The democracy are the users and the end user organizations, and the oligarchs are those that control the technology. But what we've seen over the past 20 years is every time we think that there's a vendor that's going to run away with the entire ball game, it doesn't happen. Whether it's open source, whether it's standards, whether it's a new technology that comes along. The fact is, though, if it does go to software, it's much easier, to Yoram's point, to come around and find a way out of a lock-in at the software level than it is at a strictly hardware level. Mm-hmm. You can find different approaches. You can virtualize on top of virtualization if you need to, as long as you have the ability to make that performance requirement met. So I do think we're going to see more software defined. We're going to see it at a holistic level. We're going to see more integration, but is that integration going to happen by a vendor that runs away with the entire infrastructure stack? Or is it going to happen by a service provider that says, run any stack you want, I can run it cheaper than anybody else, including you? So it's a very tumultuous time, but I think what's probably the biggest takeaway is that the power is more and more in the hands of the democracy, of the end user organizations. They know what they want for their business requirements. They know IT is essential for them to do that. And they've got the resources to find the right solution. No Fortune or Global 2000 or S&P 500 company is going to let any one vendor dictate 50% of their capital spend. It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting your analogy of the democracy versus the oligarchy, and that I think this era that we're in, with mobile, social, is really there's an enormous amount of change there. It feels to me almost vaguely like the .com era. There's a lot of shifts going on. Cloud. Seems like the legacy vendors are really struggling to catch up, and some of the smaller companies are really moving ahead. But at any rate,
well, just to double down on that, the operators in IT organizations, whether they're in service providers or enterprises, talk to each other a lot. They have a great community effect. In fact, you could argue that social media grew out of geeks talking to geeks about what's going on with technology. That's not going to change.
Right. Alessandro, looking in your crystal ball, I know you have an infallible sense of what's happening in the future. I mean, after all, you've got Leonardo da Vinci up in your office, so tell us where we're going to be talking about 3 years from now with software defined.
I think the same themes that we're trying to address today will be still popular and relevant 3 years from now, but I think 3 years from now we will have even a more mature ecosystem of software and hardware and cloud. I actually view Amazon as one of the big winners in the overall SDDC. I think Amazon is probably the largest threat to all the incumbents.
Why is AWS the biggest winner in software defined?
Because the software defined is very much connected to the ability to virtualize your entire data center, and the Amazon model or the cloud model, AWS model, takes that to the extreme. You don't have to even run anything on premise, and if they keep lowering the prices the way they're doing it, they will become even more competitive with the current infrastructure. So I think actually this will put between containers, between Amazon, between the maturation of OpenStack and other technologies, I think this will put a lot of pressure on incumbents, and this is great for customers, end users.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. It's going to be interesting no matter how it turns out. I thank the four of you for your expertise. A lot of good stuff. I'll send you the link to this video. It'll be on demand, and we can all tweet about it and promote it. And I thank you very much for joining.